Yes, thank you, Natasha. Thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen now, and when I do so, I'm going to turn my camera off, if that's okay, just so it runs a bit more smoothly for everyone. But just so you can put a face to a name, I'm Josh, and I'm one of the screening specialists within the Access group. So if I just share my screen now, put that up. Just to check if that can all be seen. Can you see that fine, Natasha?
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'll leave you to it and I'll go off screen and off microphone as well. So over to you.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So obviously what we're covering today, everyone, and thank you for everyone taking the time to join this webinar, is obviously looking at how to be Brexit ready with a robust background screening process. But I think there's obviously going to be a bit more of emphasis on the right to work side of things today. And as I mentioned, I'm Josh, I'm one of the screening specialists with the Access group. And as I'm going through this, like Natasha mentioned, if you want to ask any questions, and I believe we'll be going through those at the end, and there's a few polls as we go through as well. So to begin, the first three things that we just want to go over is the current situation with Brexit and what it actually means, I suppose. So obviously free movement ends as of the 31st of December. There's only really 3 months left now for HR professionals to prepare for this, to get sturdy processes in place, make sure that their businesses are ready for the impact that this is going to have from both a recruitment perspective, but also a HR professional perspective. And we believe, and I think it'd be a bit naive to think that there won't be a significant impact, because there will. So making sure that you know your stuff, you're prepared for what's about to come. You keep yourself up to date with things, because no one knows exactly how everything's going to play out, but keeping yourself up to date as much as possible will obviously help you get through it in the smoothest way possible. So I believe that leads us on to the first poll. Natasha, if you could just run that poll 1 for us, please.
Of course. So, are your screening processes ready for post-Brexit UK? Hopefully it's popped up on the screen for you. If it hasn't, feel free to just pop a yes, no, or not sure in the chat function. I know different sort of browsers sometimes can make a difference. So we'll just give it 20 seconds or so. Oh, it's going to be a tight one. Another 10 seconds. Thank you, Sharon, for letting us know. It's always good. Okay, I'll end the polling now, and you should be able to see the results on your screen as well, Josh.
Okay, yeah, I can. Bro, I mean, so there's a lot of not sures there, shall we say. So there's a few yeses, so great that you lot have got things ready post-Brexit. There's quite a few no's, so I'm presuming those no's might be tying in with the not sure side of things, so not really sure what you need to get ready in terms of making that screening process ready for post-Brexit. But yeah, interesting results. We'll hopefully be helping with some of those not sures and no's by the time we get to the end of that. All right, thank you, Natasha. So moving forward, so what does this actually mean? What does Brexit actually mean? So if we just cover a few points here. So as I mentioned, free movement will no longer apply for EU nationals after the 31st of December 2020. Now, if we look at people within the UK already, there's currently 3.7 million EU citizens that reside in the UK. Now, once Brexit comes into play, so any EU national who already resides here or enters the UK before that date of the 31st of December must apply for what's called a settled or a pre-settled status. Now, the deadline for those applications, so for people who are already here or who come here before the 31st, applying for that settled or pre-settled status, the deadline for that is the 30th of June 2021. Now, that doesn't apply to Irish nationals, okay? So it's any EU national except Irish nationals. Now, if they miss the application deadline, EU nationals will have no legal right to remain in the UK, never mind working in the UK. So on that point, really, it's worth, and we'll go over this a bit later in the webinar, but it's worth making sure you check your workforce, check who are EU nationals, who needs to apply for that status, because it's going to be in your best interest to make sure that that is completed on time. So a few of those dates for everybody to note down, if you're not already aware of those, obviously that date of the 31st of December, when free movement will end for EU nationals, and then that deadline for settled or pre-settled status applications for the 30th of June 2021. Moving forward, so the way that it's actually going to look, or the way that we're hoping it will look based on obviously all the information that has been given, is as of the 1st of January 2021, it's going to be based on a points-based immigration system. Okay, so that will apply to everybody arriving in the UK. Now, EU citizens move into the UK to work will need to get a visa in advance now. Now, what the hope is for this new points-based immigration system is that it won't actually distinguish between EU and non-EU nationals. And what it's actually designed to do is attract people who can actually contribute to the UK's economy, regardless of where they're from or their origin. That's not what it's about. It's all about people who can actually contribute to the UK as a whole. So it's all points-based. And as I mentioned, so that there's no part of that which distinguishes between EU and non-EU nationals. Now, what that will mean in terms of visas is obviously you've still got your standard visas, so visitor visas, student visas, where there can obviously be different restrictions on working during non-term times, whatever that might be. So standard visas are still there, but there is now what is called a skilled worker visa. Now, EU citizens that are applying for a skilled worker visa will need to show they have a job offer from an approved employee sponsor. Now, becoming an employee sponsor is something that as a business you'll need to apply for, and I'll go into that in a second. But the job will need to be at the required skill level, so equivalent to an A level. The applicant will need to speak English, that's a necessity, and the salary will need to meet a relevant threshold. Okay, so again, this all ties in. It's a point-based system. There's no distinguishing between EU and non-EU citizens. It's all about what they can actually bring, contribute, and offer to the UK's economy. So the points there, again, just to note down, if anyone's taking notes on this, obviously you will get the slides, but the skilled worker visa, they need to show that they've got a job from an approved employee sponsor. Now, an employee sponsor is where a business who wants to make use of this visa route, you'll need to pre-apply to become registered with the Home Office in advance of next year. And what that allows you to do is become a sponsor for these people who are coming into the UK who are on one of these skilled work visas. So you need to make sure that you pre-apply to become registered with the Home Office in advance of next year. So obviously try and do that this side of Christmas. I know a lot of businesses that I'm speaking to at the moment are currently going through that. So it's actually obviously a lot of people have started that process. But if you haven't and you want to make use of the visa route, make sure that you get onto the Home Office and start that application process. Now, what you've also got is what is called a Global Talent Scheme visa. Now, this is just to allow highly skilled scientists, and researchers to come to the UK without a job offer. So these are obviously specialised industries, specialised roles. As it says there, these are highly skilled individuals that sit in the sciences or sit in research of some sort, and they don't actually need a job offer to be able to come into the UK. So that's just one to make you aware of as well. Okay, so that'll lead us on to poll 2. Natasha, if you could run that for us, that'd be great.
Should be on your screen now.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So this is, what is your biggest challenge at the moment? Is it around compliance, diversity, recruiting talented employees, or managing COVID-19 with workforce? If we give that about 20, 30 seconds as well, Natasha, that'd be great.
when we do these live events, you get to see the bars go up and down as people vote. So unfortunately, I'm the only one that gets to see that, but it's quite insightful. Give it 10 seconds, maybe. Thanks, Sharon. Diversity for you as well. Right. Well, in the polling, you should be able to see the results
brilliant.
now.
So diversity and recruiting talented employees are at the top there. Compliance being the smallest one out of all those results, which is surprising, to be fair. Managing COVID-19, obviously COVID-19 at the moment, let's be honest, no one really knows what's happening with that. Hopefully that'll be over sooner rather than later. So that's not even a question we need to ask anymore. But who really knows from that side of things at the moment. On terms of obviously recruiting talented employees, I mean, that's something realistically at the moment, which is just getting tougher and tougher, and obviously making sure you have a great recruitment process in place, a great onboarding process in place is only going to help you be more competitive in what is probably the most competitive market at the moment. Let's be honest, there's not many candidates about at the moment in terms of obviously talented candidates, and obviously getting them into the business is competitive. But yeah, moving forward from that, thank you for that, Natasha. Interesting results. So if we look at obviously the current challenges in the market today, so there's obviously been a talent shift. Now there's a lot fewer face-to-face interactions, and obviously that lies down to COVID at the moment. And because of that, how we communicate and engage with candidates has obviously changed a lot. And what we need to look at as well is, in such a competitive market and obviously post-Brexit, is there going to be the need to repurpose candidates due to potential labour shortages, due to potential skill shortages, dependent on where they might lie? And what you really need to ask yourself, are you cutting any corners, or are you actually being more thorough through this process? So you really need to look at what you're doing through these processes as well, and making sure that you're getting everything done that needs to be done, and not cutting corners from that perspective. Now, what you've also got is all the different generations. So you've got millennials, Generation Z, you've got the older generations, and all of these generations have different expectations in the workplace, but also through the recruitment process as well. So obviously how you approach, attract, engage, and screen will be different to how you're doing it now. So again, making sure you've got those robust processes in place, which can obviously adapt and be applicable to all these different scenarios and all these different generations is vital. Now, as we mentioned about the market being competitive, so businesses at the moment are being forced to move at pace to compete and obviously push checks later post onboarding. And that's due to it being a lot more of a competitive world at the moment. So there's a lot of a smaller candidate pool, and it will get even smaller post-Brexit, especially with visas coming into play, obviously those skilled work visas, and becoming sponsors depending on whether you become one or not. So again, you need to make sure that you've got something in place which keeps people engaged through that process. One of the biggest issues that goes on through recruitment or onboarding as a whole, shall we say, is not keeping candidates engaged through that process. If you don't keep someone engaged through that process, and another business manages to, unfortunately, you are going to lose out on potentially a great candidate because of that. Now, on that note, obviously, you've got to move quickly on candidates. And as I've mentioned, keeping them engaged in the process, whether that be through interviewing and screening, you need to speed up that process. And obviously avoid candidates receiving counter offers. As I mentioned, you could very well lose out on some very skilled and fantastic candidates if you've not got the right process, but also the quick enough process in place. Now, obviously, you've got to collate accurate data from candidates quickly, and you've got to balance out that speed and quality. So that's where you really start looking into things of human-led processes and automated system-led processes. So obviously, you don't want to sacrifice any quality through that process. But if you've got, for example, a solution that can automate but still keep that brand awareness through that process, still keep your core values through that process, then it's going to keep and balance out that speed and quality through that whole process. Okay. So what can you actually do to get prepared? And this is obviously vital to make sure that you can get robust processes in place. So first things first, you've got to keep an eye out. So the government is due to release further guidance on the changes to right to work and obviously right to work checks and how they might be processed post Brexit. But you need to just keep an eye out, make sure that you're keeping yourself up to date with the information that the government is released. Obviously, over COVID-19, as we all probably know, there's been some guideline changes around right to work checks. So obviously making sure that you keep in touch with the government's info around that side of things, and obviously leading up to post-Brexit is vital. One key thing that you should be doing is carrying out an audit of your workforce. So you need to identify how many EU nationals you have within your workforce and what their status is, and checking whether they've applied for the settled or pre-settled status, whether they plan to do so. Obviously, it's in your best interest to make sure that you have this information at hand. You've obviously got to make a list of who has applied for that settled, pre-settled status, and make sure you regularly review that for updates on what is happening with these employees. You need to make sure that you know exactly what's going on with your workforce, so you know what to expect leading up to the dates that we've mentioned previously. Number 4, so knowing the current and the new immigration rules. So what right to work checks are needed, how to conduct these. And again, that ties in with number 1 quite well, of keeping an eye out for the government information as they're due to release further guidance and changes around how things will work. Make sure that you keep yourself up to date and you know the current and new immigration rules. You've got to review your current onboarding processes and resources as well, and that's pretty vital. If we're being perfectly honest, your process now leading up to Brexit is almost definitely going to have to change post-Brexit. So make sure you review your current onboarding processes, the resources that you have available to do so, and make sure that you've got a plan in place to change or adapt those as necessary. If we then look at step 6, so you need to think about written policies that you need to support best practice on immigration support for overseas employers. So you need to make sure you've got those policies in place and obviously think about getting those ready. You've got to appraise your in-house immigration expertise and your need for any specialist advice. So if you need to bring somebody within the business to help you get these things in place, help you get the house in order, shall we say, getting ready for post-Brexit, reach out to these specialists, obviously to give you advice and make sure they have the qualifications to give immigration advice. It's actually illegal to give that advice without the correct qualifications. So look at organisations such as CIPD or whoever that might be in your specific industry. Obviously, a vital piece of information is knowing how to become an employee sponsor, and obviously your duties if overseas workers will be needed, or you'll be taking on overseas workers after January the 1st. So make sure you go on the Home Office website, have a look at how you actually go about becoming an employee sponsor. It's going to be vital if you currently have overseas employees within the business and you intend to continue bringing overseas employees within the business. You need to become an employee sponsor. It's just going to make your lives a whole lot easier. You've then got number 9. So obviously you need to discuss workforce planning at a strategic level. So that ties in with what I was just saying in number 8, and obviously where you get your current candidates or employees from, where the majority of those sit in terms of are they an EU national or not, or are they UK based, wherever that might be from. So you need to understand where you're getting people from today and where will you attract your employees from in the future. And what role will automation play for you in shaping your needs in terms of finding those candidates, having ATS systems in place, having a robust screening process in place, which is vital to get these people in. So you really need, and that I can't stress that enough, you really need to plan this at a strategic level of where your workforce lies in terms of where are you getting them from today and where are you looking or planning to get them moving forward. So please make sure that you've got that planned out. And then you've got the Check, Change, Go strapline. So this will just direct people and businesses to a straightforward checker tool. So if you just Google Check, Change, Go, that will help you find out a bit more information around that. So hello, everyone. If I just pause that really quickly, and I'll start that from the beginning. So as Natasha mentioned, this is a short video, interview style video that we did with our own in-house HR team at Access. So I'm just going to play this. They just give a bit of an insight about how they're planning Brexit, right to work, and obviously planning the workforce post-Brexit. So if I just play this for you now. So hello, everyone. Continuing on from the theme of obviously how to be Brexit ready with a robust background screening process, we're actually going to have a chat with our very own Access Group HR team. So thank you both for being here today. Just to introduce who we've got on the call. So we've got our head of recruitment, Els, and we've got our HR partner, Sonia, who between them have many years at HR experience and obviously being HR professionals. So thank you guys for taking the time out to talk with us and really give us your experience so far getting ready for Brexit. We all know how tough of a task that can be. So to begin with, really, to set the scene, could you tell us, Els, a bit more about Access as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a software company. We have about 2,600, well, over 2,600 employees who are located in over 40 offices globally. About 2,000 people of those are in the UK itself. And a fun fact, we have tripled in size over the last 3 years or something. So we have grown dramatically, recruited lots and lots and lots of people, and we're also looking for a really healthy growth going forward. So we need to make sure that we tap into the widest talent pool that there is, right? And that includes obviously the European talent pool that we might be losing due to Brexit.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and obviously looking at past growth and obviously how exponential that's been really, and obviously the future growth plans for that. And probably for you, Sonia, how have you really prepared for the potential Brexit workforce change?
Well, we started as our first stage. We really just wanted to inform our employees because it's quite a relevant topic that was in the news, and so there was a lot of interest across just not the employees that were going to be impacted by this, but across our workforce. So we informed people, and we started to compile frequently asked questions, and we started to share that across all of our UK employee base. And we've been doing that for quite a bit of time. We've signposted our UK teams on any updates following large government announcements. And what we've been doing is encouraging them to apply for their settlement. And we've done that through providing clear guidance on how they do that. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to understand what they needed to do. And then we dovetailed this into our right to work software that we have, our screening software, to help facilitate that. So, and we have a people solution to validate and update our records so we can make sure that we can report on that and keep track of that.
Yeah, which is obviously vital in the time and the changes that are due to come, isn't it? So brilliant, thank you for that. Final question really, probably for you, Sonia, is now that you've informed everybody within the organisation, what are those next steps?
So we're going to move from our inform and encourage to more looking at our compliance. So as good record keeping, we'll conduct an audit of all of our records, and we're going to start to encourage that compliance happens, working towards the deadline that the government set.
And I suppose, obviously, just one final quick question, really, guys. I mean, what advice would you give to other HR professionals in a position where they're needing to prepare for this also?
Yeah, good question. Really good question, Josh. I would say that two things are really imperative. One, you have to have a good ATS system, applicant tracking system, and two, you have to have robust processes in place. So Ensure that you ask a question about right to work at the application stage and capture that in your ATS. Really, really important, because that will then allow you to have one version of the truth for all your applications, and then you can report on it and you can check on it. That would be my major two pieces of advice. Sonia, what about you? What advice would you have?
Just from our point of view is make sure that you keep up to date on your information, you keep your employees engaged and aware of what's happening. And again, on our side, we've got great automated processes and systems to support our processes. It just makes it easier to keep track of everything and audit where we need to.
Yeah. What about the app, the Right to Works app that you use with your team, Sonia?
So the Right to Work app is great because it just allows us, especially as we've moved to the virtual way of working we have, it allows us to just engage with employees, and also a part of the team does the initial screening when we start. It just allows us to facilitate that and make that work in this remote world we're in right now.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, guys. So, I mean, from just to really sum up what you guys have said, obviously have robust processes in place. Obviously, as you said, Els, having a great ATS is key. So you've got that one version of truth, and it's not that sort of disparate approach. That's great advice, guys. And thank you so much for your time today. That's it. It was just a quick 3 questions for you. I'm not going to grill you anymore. And I'm sure that's helped, and we all are a bit more prepared for the big change that's coming. But yeah, thank you, guys.
Welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
So brilliant. So that was just a quick run over, as we said, with our actual HR team at Access. So hopefully that's helped in terms of giving you an idea from an actual HR team's perspective. Okay. So moving forward again, so what does a best practice screening process actually look like? So what you need to understand first and foremost is the requirements for your specific industry or for that specific role within your business, shall we say, okay? So you need to understand what's needed for the role and the checks that are actually required, rather than just undertaking every check that you feel might be relevant. Sometimes it isn't. So if you look at, just as an example, DBS checks, for example, obviously they're role specific. You can't just do an enhanced DBS on anyone. You can on a basic level disclosure, but even standard, you can't just do that on anybody within the workforce. So there needs to be certain guidelines around who you can actually run these checks on. So understanding what you actually need to do is vital. And the way really to do that is to understand what regulatory body sits above your industry. So if you look at education, obviously you've got Ofsted. If you look at care, you've got the CQC, so whoever that might be. You then need to obviously have a look at your people and clarify who is actually responsible for carrying out these checks. Are they aware that they're accountable for this process and for getting these things done? Are they aware on what they actually need to do and what the entire process looks like? And not just they might need to do a check here and there, but where they fit in to that entire process. You then obviously need to make sure that you have a clear policy in place. And when we're talking about policy, that's when it comes to things like red flags on specific checks, whether that be references, whether that be criminal background checks, whether that be credit checks. No matter what that is, you need to have a clear policy in place on what you class as a red flag, what might need senior approval if there's something on there which might not actually throw that candidate out, shall we say. But you need to make sure you've got clear guidelines on what is acceptable and what is not. And then you need obviously to have a look at technology needs. So getting an automated process in place or a technological process in place is pretty vital in my opinion. So you need to look at, do you need to integrate with third-party systems and actually share any data? So are you integrating with any third-party HR systems, ATS systems, whatever that might be? And you need to be able to report on that process. So you need to understand what you actually need to show and what formats you need to show these reports in. Dependent again on who your regulatory body is, you might need to prepare audits and produce audits of best practice screening process. So having great reporting functionality is key. There is an unbelievable number of businesses that I'm in conversation with or that I speak to regularly, which still do all of this stuff on spreadsheets. And if you look at spreadsheets from an actual background checking perspective and just being able to see the dates that things have been completed in terms of reporting, it's poor. So yeah, getting a more robust process in place than just spreadsheets is absolutely vital, guys. Okay, so that leads us on to poll 3, the final poll. Natasha, if you could run that. Thank you.
On your screen now.
That's brilliant, thank you. So this is how do you currently screen your candidates? So are things done manually? So when you're doing things via spreadsheets and things like that, like I mentioned, are you using an actual piece of software to do this for you or to automate that process for you? Or are you outsourcing this process, so using managed service providers? If we give that 20, 30 seconds, that'd be great.
So for those of you that can't see the poll, it's how do you currently screen? So manually, software, or outsource, if you want to pop it in the chat as well. Okay, so automated then manually. Interesting. Okay, I will just end the polling now, and then you should be able to see the results.
Wow, so majority is manually at the moment. Okay, brilliant. Interesting that a few of you use a piece of software and have a piece of software in place. It's not a widely used process, shall we say, but it's becoming a lot more popular because what it actually does is it compiles the best in terms of the manual process, so having that sight over the process and control over that process, but it also brings the best of both worlds. So you've got your outsourcing where it automates that process, almost takes a bit of the responsibility away. It's a quicker process. It just combines those two together. But in terms of manual processes, obviously, if you've got a very, very good manual process in place, obviously it's not dire needs that you need to change that around. But we're in a world now where automated processes basically are just so much better than a manual process. So if you're still using spreadsheets and things like that, it's worth looking out there to see how a piece of software could actually fit into that process. I know that a lot of people stay with the manual process because they want to keep control over the background checking process rather than give it to a managed service provider to complete for them. So have a look at what software is out there. It's worth checking out to improve your process, keep your control over that, and just make it a whole round better, more robust process. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, everyone who voted. So looking a bit more at that automated screening process and how that can actually look. So for an example, a candidate would apply for a role, that could be through an ATS, wherever that might be, through a job board, however you might do that. Let's say they get to interview stage, so they arrive for an interview. They have to provide documentation for the specific checks that you need to process. Again, these might be role or industry specific. If you have a mobile app in place, like the mobile app we provide, you can complete an instant right to work check, and that can be done at that point, obviously in person with the candidate. It also fits in, just to make everyone aware, in the world where you might not always be doing these things in person. So it can work from a remote perspective as well. Then obviously you're confident that candidate has the right to work in the UK. That's normally the first point of call in your screening process, or it should be anyway. The candidate is then offered a role. So this could be subject to background checks. The candidate is then sent a link to a portal where they enter all the details, and this is a tailored candidate portal, so it'll tie in with your brand, so it's all your brand awareness. It's not going off to an outsourced provider that will do this for you and may not process or work the same way that you do internally, for example. So it keeps that nice, consistent approach for the candidate, keeps them engaged. The candidate obviously needs to give their consent to their data being used when obviously being processed with background checks. They then begin automatically. It'd be your responsibility as a hirer to monitor the progress of these background checks, and obviously you will be alerted to any red flags. So you've not even got to go in specifically check all these things, the system, and these systems will actually make you aware if there is any problems. You've also got benefits in there. For example, if you're looking at disclosure, it won't actually let you verify disclosure ID unless the information is correct. It picks up on things like that, so it prevents human error from that perspective as well. And then once this has all been complete, the hirer, so you as a business, will receive a candidate report for review. And this is essentially a compliance pack. It's PDF, so it's uneditable for obvious reasons. And it will give the results of all the checks that have been processed, all the reference information that has been taken, all that candidate's basic information and things like that. So it just smooths out that process for you. Obviously, all this information is stored within this platform. So it's not stored on spreadsheets. It's all stored securely within this platform. And at the click of a button, you can do full audit logs. So it's all auditable. It's got full audit trails if you ever need to produce one. And you can even filter down on these things and report on the whole process, depending on what information you need to see. So moving forward, looking at the Right to Work app, obviously we're focusing more on the Right to Work side of things at the moment. Let me just pause that shortly. So our Access Right to Work mobile app, we've worked really closely with the Home Office to get this bang on where it needs to be in terms of following Home Office guidelines. And having an app like this in place will just improve your process so much. You've not got to manually scan documents in, manually date and timestamp, and then save them against a file or in a HR system somewhere, dependent on where that might be. It's all in this one true point of data in this one system. And just to give you an idea of how this looks and feels, I'll play this video for you now.
You can see it opens up. We're looking at some existing candidates there, but we can create a new application. If you want to add fields for things like job reference, you can. There are elements of the system that allow you to segregate your data using tags or certain fields within the app. Then it's entering the core details of the candidate. So first name, surname, middle name, date of birth, nationality, national insurance number if required, and any other fields you may have chosen. A list pops up with the locations, and you can choose that, and then the app will know which documentation to collect in a moment. And it should be simple and easy to use all the way through. So you can see here additional fields for things like office location, and it depends what you want to put in to segregate your data. Now a list of the documentation relevant to the country of origin pops up. You simply select the one the candidate has. The app will help you frame the documentation. It will scan it and you confirm it's legible. Then you can enter an expiry date, which can be reported on at a later date to make sure that you're compliant at every stage. Throughout the process, there may be more than one document, so you may have to repeat the process more than once, depending on what's required from any country of origin. But again, it will guide you as to what's acceptable and what you need to do, and warn you of any mistakes. The next section is to go through the questions and give yes/no answers. If the answer looks like it's going to prohibit you moving forward, the app will warn you. And finally, it's a picture of the candidate to prove you're with them at that point in time. So at the front end, you've got someone logging in from your organisation, you know who's doing the check, where and when. In between that, you collect the documentation, ask the questions, and finally a picture of the candidate to prove you're with them at that point in time.
Brill. So that's just a quick overview of the Access Screening Right to Work app. So if we actually look at that, obviously for the video, it's been slowed down a bit to make sure that you get an idea of that whole process. This video is about 2 minutes, 30 seconds long, something like that. You can complete a right to work check in less than a minute, no problem. It's so easy and simple to work through. With processes like this in place as well, what you will probably find is when you bring new people into the business, They're actually responsible for right to work checks, for example, a new hiring manager, and they do the interviews and the right to work check. Obviously, when people like that come into the business, you have to make sure that they're up to date in terms of what the right to work process is and what they need to do. You will probably find that if you have something like this in place, you won't actually have to train those individuals up, because an app like this will tell them exactly the information they need to gather, the documents that they can use, the questions they need to answer, and then they'll get that instant yes or no. Now, what that will also include is a web portal, which a central HR team could sit at, for example, and that is where you can add different chains of approval, where you can just have someone within HR that gives that additional or that final yes, those documents and that check is okay, for example. So just to give you an idea as well, and this is looking more at obviously right to work, but screening as a whole, so access screening. A few success stories here on how it's fit in with businesses and the actual direct improvements and return on investment these businesses have seen straight away. Just to touch on these really quickly, if you look at Rulian, for example, so Rulian actually transform their candidate screening and reduce the time taken by 53%. So their time to onboard was around 3 weeks. It's now an average of 7 days. If you look at Premier Care, they improved their candidate turnaround by 2 weeks, while also saving considerable admin time with access screening. And then we've also got Outlook Care as well. Again, they cut their candidate turnaround time by over 50%. So this is the sort of benefits that you can get when you're using a manual process, or even if you're using an outsourcing provider and you get a piece of automated software in place. It gives you full visibility over that process still, but just it improves turnaround times, improves the speed and the quality of that process tenfold. So obviously we're gonna, I believe, send these slides around. So obviously you'll be able to access all of these resources that we provide at the Access Group, or you can go obviously directly to our website. So if you look there, it's theaccessgroup.com/candidate screening/resources, and you can take advantage of all our free white papers, where we just give advice on obviously tackling screening, the checklist that you need for screening, that pre-employment screening survival kit. You've got right to work, frequently asked questions, and obviously that check, change, go, the transition to that post-Brexit, which we spoke about earlier. So that is it from my presentation point of view. I believe, Natasha, we'll move on to any questions that have been asked now.